Good evening. Thank you for joining. We'll start in a few minutes to go. Yeah.
Doctor, when will this be uploaded?
When will what?
When will this lecture be uploaded?
Tomorrow, inshallah.
Okay.
طيب, thank you for joining. In this session, we will go through various pieces of code, and we will analyze them together. Mostly, I am concentrating on classes and classes and pointers as well. So I already have prepared you. It's not a normal lecture, so I already have prepared you about 8 or 9 programs, and we're going to analyze them together. So let me start by this one. So let me start by this piece of code and explain basically what it is. Uh, Actually, in the previous lecture, we said that we have two kinds of memory. The first kind is called a stack, and the other kind is called a heap. And, and actually, a stack is a small memory, and it's perfectly fit for small to medium applications. And the heap is a large chunk of memory, and it's mainly used for large applications like games and big application used for banking and telecommunication and other. So in order so in order to allocate memory in a heap, we used the keyword called new. And when we allocate memory, we are allocating memory and having a pointer pointing to this piece of memory. So if we are using pointers and new keywords, this means that we want to allocate memory in the heap. So let's have this piece of code, and if anyone doesn't understand what I am saying, so just let me know. So basically, I just make it a little bit bigger. So basically, what we are doing here is that we are declaring a pointer. So int, and this is a pointer, and this this star. This star means a pointer, and this is the name of the pointer. What we said in the previous time, that the pointer is having a memory location. What we said in the previous time, that a pointer is having a memory location, is having an address that points to a memory location. So having said so, this is a pointer to an integer, this is a pointer to a float, and here I am reserving an integer space, which is 4 bytes. I am reserving it, and I am making a pointer called pointInt to point at it. And this is basically what we have said. This is assuming this is a location in memory, and then we are having a pointer, whatever it's called, to point at this empty piece of memory. So pointInt points to an integer, pointFloat points to a float. Then if we say asterisk pointInt equals something, this means that the content of this memory location that is pointed by pointInt will have the value of 45. So I am filling the value of 45 to the space that is pointed by pointInt. يعني basically pointInt هيشاور على piece of memory 4 bytes اللي هي الانتجر، و 45 هتبقى موجودة جوه this piece of memory. Point float 45.45, and then I see out the content of the pointer for integer, which is 45, the content of the pointer for 45.45, it's point float, and then I do delete. What does delete do? Delete actually frees. It deallocates, it frees the space allocated by point int and point float. So the space will no longer exist and will no longer pointed by point int and point float. So new reserves a new space, delete, freeze this new space. Let's run this piece of code together. And see what will be the result. So the result is obviously 45 and 45.45. I didn't do anything except then filling the space for point int and point float by 45 and 45.45 respectively. So this is basically what I did. Let's go to the second piece of code. So we're trying to be a little bit more complex. So the first piece of code actually is allocating an integer and a float, putting values into them, and then deallocates or freeing this piece of memory for the int and for the float. Okay, then I will have another piece of code. So the main objective of this piece of code is to create a 1D dynamic array, and then putting some values into this dynamic 1D array. What's the difference between static and dynamic 1D array? Dynamic means that you are allocating it while the program is running in the heap, not in the stack. In the heap, not in the stack. So we're allocating 1D dynamic array, and the size of this dynamic array will be input by the user. And this is the beauty of dynamic allocation. This is the beauty of dynamic allocation. So yeah, you allocate what you need from memory, and then you free what you have consumed from memory. So the beauty of dynamic allocation, that you allocate what you need from memory and you free this piece of memory when you no longer need this piece of memory. So let's see how it will go. I'll make this piece of code a little bit bigger. So I am allocating I and n as integers. I am allocating a pointer that is named p, and it is a pointer to an int. This is cout and cin. So I will enter how many numbers I would like to type. So basically, I will input the size of the 1D dynamic array. So p is equal to new int of I. What does this mean? It means that I want to allocate 5 spaces, 6 spaces, 3 spaces, etc., etc. This is something new that you didn't have before. What if I didn't manage to allocate this piece of memory? So for any reason, the memory of the laptop or the PC is full. So I just, if the allocation results by something called a null pointer, so this means that I am having a problem. So I am not able to allocate this piece of memory. So once again, after I start to allocate by new, I just compare p, which is the pointer to an int. Is it equal to a null pointer? This means I wasn't able to allocate this piece of memory. Then it's a small loop. It's a small loop to enter some integer number based on what? Based on the size of the 1D array I want to allocate. So as if I am entering a normal array. And then after this, I make another loop to print this 1D dynamic array. And then at the end of the code, so I am deallocating, I am freeing, I am no longer in need to this piece of memory allocated by the pointer p for this array. يعني مليت الاري بشوية integers وبعد كده عملت delete فبقت الاري فالبيس اوف ميموري اللي فيها الانتجرز دي بقت فاضية بعد ما كانت مليانة. طيب let's run this piece of code together. So basically, it asks me how many numbers do I want to input. So I say 3. It asks me for the first number, the second number, the third number. That's it, and it prints them to the script. So again, this piece of code allocates 3 locations for 3 integer number, 1D dynamic array. Then it asks the user to enter the first number, the second number, the third number. Then a for loop prints them to screen, and then delete, actually empty this piece in memory that was having the 3 numbers. Anyone doesn't understand what I am saying?
Doctor, can you run the code تاني كده?
Okay. So it asks you how many numbers I want to enter. So I say 3. I enter the first number, the second number, the third number. Then it prints the array with those numbers, and then if it frees the memory, or it makes the memory empty because it makes the memory locations empty. So the whole purpose, I create an array of any number of integers I want, then I print them to a screen, then I deallocate or I make the space allocated to them as free.
Okay, thank you.
طب دكتور معلش، هو delete دي فايدتها ايه تاني؟ معلش عشان ما
طيب هو انت محتاج تذاكر يا ياسين عموما، بس delete فايدتها انه انا دلوقتي نيو بألوكيت حاجه في الميموري، delete بفضل الحاجه اللي انا عملت لها allocation يعني. خلاص، يعني بحجز أماكن في الميموري عشان أدخل فيها مجموعة من النمبرز. بعد كده بفضي الأماكن دي، فديليت دي بتفضي الأماكن دي اللي محجوزة في الميموري من النمبرز دي. اوكي؟
Doctor, I have a question.
اوكي يا محمد.
What's the data type of the null pointer? Is it Boolean or is it integer?
طيب let's see together. This is a pointer. What is the name of the pointer يا محمد؟
P.
P. Of type?
Integer. I'm not talking about the pointer. I'm talking about null pointer.
About this one?
Yeah.
This one is whatever the type of the pointer, you compare it to null pointer. Null pointer, this is something that C++ understands, in which you are asking, did I manage? You are asking the compiler, did you manage to allocate this piece of memory or you didn't manage? So it will always be null pointer. It will not change, irrespective إنه B كانت pointing to an integer or to a float or to anything. Yeah. Okay. So you always compare with null pointer.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Okay. So null pointer, يعني assuming that this P is a float, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It will remain null pointer. If this is, let's say, hypothetically, it's a bool, it's a null pointer. So whatever it is, you compare. So you are just checking, ya Muhammad, whether you managed to allocate this piece of memory or you didn't manage. So you just compare with null pointer. Okay, ya Muhammad?
Yeah, thank you, doctor.
Okay.
طب دكتور ممكن سؤال؟
اتفضل.
هو بعد الليكتشر دي خلاص كده يكون خلصنا حاجات CS1 و CS خالص صح؟ والكلاس اللي جاي هيكون حاجات بتاعت 110.
بس الكلاس اللي جاي لو انت الكلاس اللي جاي ده في حتة يعني يعني هناخدها تاني من 106 صغيرة اللي هي بداية الكلاسز، وهنكمل عليها حاجات 110 بقى تاني.
خلاص اوكي ميرسي جدا.
دكتور هو المرة الجاية اللي هو الكلاس الجاي هيبقى OOP ولا OOD؟ يعني ديزاين ولا بروجرامينج؟
لا هيبقى OOP، وبعد كده في آخر ال OOP هتاخد OOD يعني عشان هتاخد OOD وهتبقى ديزاين وبروجرامينج. فاهمني؟ يعني في الأول هتاخد كونسبت بسي بلس بلس خلاص، وبعد كده هتعرف ازاي تعمل لها ديزاين يا محمد، وبعد ما تعرف ازاي هتعمل لها ديزاين هتاخد اكزامبل كود عليها يعني.
فهمت قصدي حضرتك.
تمام. بس
شكرا يا دكتور.
OOP يعني. اوكي. طيب let's see this piece of code. طيب. So things start to be a little bit more complex by this example. So the objective of the previous example was to know how to allocate memory for an array and how to free this memory that was allocated for the array. طيب the objective of this piece of code is actually to create an array of double and then pass a pointer to this array to a function to do something, to compute something, and then continue the main function. So again, the main purpose of this piece of code, we'll tackle it step by step, but the main purpose of this piece of code is first to allocate an array for double, a dynamic 1D array for double. Second is to pass this dynamic 2D array, 1D array of doubles to a function to do something and then continue the main. So let's see it together. طيب, this is a main. Then this I see out, I input the size of dynamic array I want. So the size of the dynamic array I input in. Then I allocate a pointer to a dynamic 1D array and the size is n. Then I simply display this one. I simply input what do I want to put in this array as doubles, and then I call a function to compute the average of those doubles, and that's it. I deallocate the dynamic 1D array of memory. So we will have it line by line. I will input the size of dynamic 1D array of doubles. Then I will allocate a 1D dynamic array of doubles, and R will point at dynamic 1D array of doubles. Then I will ask the user to fill in some doubles. And then I will compute, I will call a function that is called average. And here we will stop for a while. This function is called average. And this function takes an input, the dynamic 1D array that is based on size n, and it takes an input the size of the dynamic 1D array. So again, the function takes an input, the dynamic 1D array of double, and this is basically this star R, and the second one is the size of the array. Type. This piece will make me, assumingly, 1D dynamic array, and R will point at this dynamic array. خلاص? R is a pointer. Then I will input this 1D dynamic array of doubles. Then I will call the function that is called average. It returns a double, and the first input is the pointer to a dynamic 1D array, which is named star R, and then the size of the array. Type. Can I do it differently? Yes, I can do it differently. I can say also double average so both work. Then I calculate the average here. then I calculate the average here, and then I calculate the summation of all the numbers, sum equals sum plus Ri, and then here I calculate the average, which is sum over n, and I return the average and I print it to the display. So please have a look at this piece of code before I run it and show it to you. And if you don't understand anything, just let me know. Everything is okay? So let's run this piece of code. So let's run it slowly. It seems I'm having some problems into it. I will fix it. So input the size of the array. Assume it's 3. It asked me for the first number, 10.5. For the second number, 11.5. For the third number, 12.5. So 3 double number. It takes them, puts them in dynamic 1D array of double. Then it calls the function average, and it passes to it the pointer to this array. And that's it. It calculates the average of the 3 numbers. So I will make you look at the code again. If anyone doesn't understand, the whole difference here that I am passing and a pointer to a dynamic 1D array of double, to a dynamic 1D array of double. Type. Let's have it more. So let's have a more complex piece of code. This piece of code is somehow similar to what you have in the assignment. So the main purpose of this piece of code is actually to generate random numbers between 1 and 10, and from a C++ perspective, the main purpose of this piece of code is to be able to return a pointer to an array. So the objective of this piece of code is to generate a random number between 1 and 10 and print them to a screen. This is the objective of this piece of code. Yet, from a C++ perspective, the whole purpose of this piece of code is actually to return a pointer to a dynamically allocated array. يعني بالعربي ترجع pointer ل dynamic array. ترجع pointer ل dynamic array. طيب, let's see how it will work. Let's go to the main. The main, I am allocating 5 integers and I am pointing to them by a pointer p. Then I am calling a function called getRandom, and this function returns a pointer. Returns a pointer to an array of integers. Return a pointer to array of integers. Then all what I do is printing this array. I will repeat. The main objective of this piece of code is simply to be able to return from a function a pointer to a dynamic 1D array. A pointer to a dynamic 1D array. Let's see how it works again. So first it allocates it allocates 5 integer numbers, and p as a pointer points at them. Then it calls a function called getRandom, and this function returns a pointer to a dynamic 1D array. This is the whole objective of this piece of code. Inside getRandom, inside the function which is getRandom, I assume you have taken this in 106. If you didn't, let me know to point to you the place where such thing exists in my 106 lecture. So you're generating a seed for randomization, and then you simply assign this array by a random number between 1 and 10. Then what's so important? This return R. What's R? What's R? It is an array. And then the pointer, which is b, will point to a filled array. Will point to a filled array with integer numbers, and then I print this array. So here we go. Assuming that this is dynamic array, 1D array, this is a pointer that is called b. Sorry for being repetitive. B points to dynamic 1D array. I pass it to a function, it fills it, and then I return the pointer with a filled numbers. Okay, let's run this piece of code and see how it will go. Let's run this piece of code. So it's simply generated 5 integer numbers. So it started, as I said, by the allocation. It calls function getRandom. It returns a pointer to a filled function, and then it simply print out this array. I'll pause for 10 seconds here if anyone doesn't understand. So just let me know. يا محمد المهدي. He disconnected.
دكتور انا بس عندي انترنت ايشوز I'm doing something دلوقتي فعمال بخش واطلع من التليفون.
ولا يهمك، ناس كتير عندها انترنت ايشوز يا ياسين. اوكي طيب let's go to another
دكتور
piece. يا كرم.
دكتور
ايوه يا
أنا مش فاهمة الستep اللي هي set the seed
دي ولا دي؟
أنا مش فاهمة الحتة دي كلها.
طيب
أيوه
طيب الobjective of this piece of code يا كارمل is to be able to generate random number between 1 and 10. This piece of code. Okay. طيب what is the purpose of srand time؟ عشان كل مرة تعملي فيه running للبروجرام ما تطلعش نفس random numbers. كل مرة تعملي فيه running للبروجرام يبقى فيه random numbers مختلفة. فده اسمها seed of randomization. يعني أنا المرة التانية اللي أنا هرن فيها البروجرام ده مرة تانية هتطلع لي numbers totally different عن اللي فاتت، والتالتة هتطلع لي totally different عن اللي فاتت. اللي بيأشور القصة دي هي الفانكشن اللي اسمها srand، ودي موجودة يا كارمل في لايبرري اسمها ctime. اوكي طيب ازاي انا بجنريت random number between 1 and 10؟ simply دي random function الطبيعية، يعني rand mod 10 دي بتخليني اجنريت random number between 1 and 10 0 and 10. لو خليتها 20 0 and 9 sorry. لو خليتها 20 بتجنريت ما بين 0 و 19. لو خليتها 100 وهكذا. فانا بخليها تجنريت random number between 1 and 10 عشان كده بعمل plus 1. اوكي فالsrand دي بتخليني كل مرة بعمل فيها running يا كارمل للبروجرام تخليني بتطلع لي random numbers مختلفة يعني. اوكي كارمل.
اوكي تمام thank you.
طيب let's go into this piece of code. We finished the main topics with the pointers. We'll be speaking about setters, about classes, about setters and getters. And what is the purpose of, first of all, this is the definition of the class. It has two functions, get rating and set rating. Type. Generally, what is the purpose of the setters and the getters? The purpose of the setters and the getters is to be able to access private members of the class, to be able to access private members of the class, to be able to access private members of the class. Why? Private members of the class, they cannot be accessed from outside of the class. يعني هوريكم الكلام ده معناته ايه، بس just let me speak for a little bit. طيب هنا private وهنا public. private معناها انه those attributes and or functions cannot be accessed except from functions within the class اللي هم الsetters والgetters. public يعني any object outside any object belongs to this class can access those functions. Any objects belong to the class can access those functions. Let's have things كده step by step مع بعض. طيب عندنا one member اللي هو title and then another public member called rating, get rating and set rating. So let's see one step at a time. My movie, this is an object that belongs to a class called movie. This is a string called rating. Then if I come here and say, for example, if I come here and say, for example, my movie, this is the name of the object, dot title equal whatsoever, the compiler will disagree with me because this is a private member. Type, how to handle this issue? For title and for rating, I do the setters and the getter. My movie, this is the name of the object, dot set rating, then rating equal my movie, this is the name of the object that belongs to the class that is named movie, dot get rating. This just display a private member of the class which is rating. Let's see how it will work. Let's run it. طيب, it runs correctly. Let's see. Let's see how it will work. This is the definition of the class. Two private attributes, title and rating. This is a function, the getter. The getter simply returns the private member of the class, which is rating. Basically, this thing. This is the rating, and this is the private member. Set rating, it's simply assigned to a value for the private member of the class. This is rating, and this is, this is the private member, which is named rating, and I set the value for this private member by the value of the movie rating. So let's see how it will work. So coming by here, my movie, this is an object that belongs to a class called movie. Then my movie, this is an object, set rating, and I give it a value of G. Then it goes to this function. Then it checks if the movie rating, this parameter, is equal to G, then rating will be equal to G. Then I simply call the function which is called getRating that exists in the class, and I give it to a variable called rating, and then I print the variable that is called rating, and that's why it prints G. Assuming it's something else like K, let us run this code. It will simply display NR. Why? Movie rating is K, so it checks if movie rating is G or PG. No, it's not. Then the rating will be equal to NR, and that's why it will print to the screen NR. I will simply leave this for 20 seconds if you want to inquire about something, and then continue our examples. Okay. It's a little bit bigger example. So this is a bigger class. So this class also has setter and getter. The objective of this piece of code is to be able to have more than one object that belong to the class, and then compare them together, or do whatever. Let's see how it will work. So first of all, I create an object called box1 that belongs to a class called box. Another object called box2 belongs to a class called box. And then I set, this is a setter for the private members of the class, which is box, for the length, breadth, and height. And this is another object. I am setting those values for it. And then I am computing the volume for box 1 and computing the volume for box box2. Very simple piece of code. Very simple piece of code. So I'll go to the compiler and I let you see how it will go. So this is the class that is called box. This is a class that is called box. Those are setter functions, and then this is to calculate the volume. Here, this is a getter function. This is set length, this is set width, this is set height. Here, I make two objects that belong to a class that is called box. This is a setter for box1. Its length is 6, breadth is 7, and height is 5. For box2, 12, 13, and 10. Then box1 volume will be 6 times 7 times 5. Box2 volume will be 12 times 13 times 10. And I will see out this this thing. Okay. Anyways. I'm sorry. Here it calculates the volumes for box 1 and box 2. I want to remind you by something. When you have an object of the class, it will be allocated in memory. So this is box 1, and its length is 6 and breadth 7 and height is 5. This is box 2, 12, 13, and 10. Okay, so once again, when you create an object that belongs to a class, then it will be allocated in memory. It will be allocated in memory, and this is for box 2 as I said. Okay, I will remain 20 seconds in case you want to inquire about something. Okay. This piece of code is important. It's quite similar to what you have in your assignment. This is simply the creation of an array of objects. Type. What's an array of object? You know the array of integer. Each place in it will be having an integer. So the array of object, each place, each location in the array of object is an object by itself. Type. I have an array. Each place in the array is an object that belongs to certain class. And this object has the attributes and you can do some functions with it. Okay, so let's explain this piece of code a little bit more. Let's go to the main. Student st. So student is a class. St is an object. However, it's an array of objects. 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 So st.0 is an object that belongs to the class which is named student. St of 1 is an object that belongs to a class called student. St of 2 is an object that belongs to a class student. 3 and 4 and 5. For simplicity, we'll make it just 2 in order not to do too many things. So once again, this is an array of objects. So St of 0 is an object that belongs to the class that is called student, and it will have its own attributes, and it can call the functions of the class which is called student. Right. How it will work? Let's just here we have an array of 3, and this array is called ST, and every location here in the array is an object, which means that St of 0 will have the attributes so St of 0, we have St of 0, which is an object dot name. We have an St dot marks, and St of 0 is an object, so I can call any function, any public function in the class, like get name, like get marks, like display info. So let's see how it will work. Student number 1. Sorry, I lost the connection. معلش, do you still hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
Doctor, we can hear you.
So what's the problem with this? Okay, and that's it. So this is very similar to what you have in the assignment. Let's go back to it. This is an array of objects belong to a class student. When I say st of I dot get name, and if I is equal to 0, then st of 0 is an object. So this object has a name, this object has a mark. So I will get the name and the marks of object 0, object 1, object 2, and object 3, whatever the number is. Okay? So st of 0 is an object that belongs to a class called student. And because it is an object that belongs to the class, so I can access the functions of the class, which is get name, get marks, etc. And then this loop is actually to display the name and the marks of each object. st0, st1, st2, st3, st4, st whatever, based on the size of the array of objects. So I will remain just this part for you. Take a look at it. If you don't understand it, just let me know.
دكتور I'm confused في حتة ال STI و dot get marks هي بتعمل ايه في اللاين ده؟
اوكي طيب لو احنا شلنا الاتنين دي يا ياسين بقى ده object of class اسمه student. تمام؟
اوكي
طيب يبقى ساعتها ممكن انا اعمل st وانادي function جوه الكلاس. صح ولا انا غلطان؟
تمام.
طيب
هي
ST
فين function get name؟ هي فوق؟
فوق ما دي اللي موجودة جوه الكلاس.
اوكي.
طيب
اوكي cn marks ماشي.
تمام. لو st دي خليناها st of 2 يبقى st of 0 بقت object، بقت array of objects. خلاص؟ الاري كانت من فترة كده من شوية كانت array of integers. دلوقتي الاري بقت array of objects. يعني ايه array of object؟ يعني كل element عبارة عن object.
اللي هو النيمز صح؟
اللي هم لا الاوبجكت مش اللي هو النيمز. بص كده ده كلاس اسمه student صح؟
يس.
تمام. الكلاس اللي اسمه student فيه attributes وفيه functions. خلاص؟ ف st of 0 يقدر ينادي الفانكشنز اللي موجودة في الكلاس ويقدر ينادي الفانكشنز اللي موجودة في الكلاس. طب ايه الفانكشنز اللي موجودة في الكلاس؟ بص عليها كده يا
ماركس وديسبلاي.
ممتاز. طيب يبقى انا ممكن اعمل array of objects. خلاص؟ و st of 0 بقى هو نفسه object، و st of 1 بقى object تاني، و st of 2 بقى object، وهكذا. طيب دي فور لوب صغيرة بتلوب من I less than 2 أو 5 it doesn't matter. خلاص؟ وبعد كده بتروح تنده الفانكشن بتاعت each object st of 0 بتروح نادها get name. بعد كده st of 1 بتروح نادها get name. st of 2 بتروح نادها get name، وهكذا يعني. فدي array of object وليس array of integers. فبنده الفانكشنز بتاعت الاوبجكت ده اللي بيبلونج لكلاس اسمه ايه عندنا؟
الستودنت.
تمام.
انا فهمت، شكرا.
اوكي طيب last example. This example, the main objective of this example, I will leave it for you to try it at home, is to call a function and return an object. To call a function and return an object. What are you used for is to return an integer, is to return a double, is to return كذا. لكن sometimes you need to return an object. 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 طب let's see how it will go. Student S يبقى ده object belong لclass اسمه student. The name of it is students. S dot input. I will call a function in the class called input that has 3 parameters, and it returns an object that is belong to the class student. And this function simply display the attributes of this object. Let's see it in more details. I'll just make it less confusing. Let's see it in more details. I'll have only 5 minutes and then anyways, it displayed so let's have it in more details. Just 1 second, please. I'm adjusting something. So the class is named student. It has 2 attributes. It has a function called input, and this function returns an object. This function returns an object. This function returns an object that belongs to a class that is called student. This function returns an object type. Object belong to a class student, and I am returning an object, and I am returning an object type. Let's have it in more details. S1 is an object, belongs to a class called student. S1.input, it will call this function called input by 1001 29 Negan, and then it will return an object that belongs to a class that is called student, and then it will display the name, the ID, the age of S1 that I already have set them to a value 1001 29 and Negan. So I will leave you 1 second. 10 seconds to see. S1 belongs to student. S1.input, I am calling a function that is called input, giving it 3 parameters. Then I create an object that named obj, belongs to a class that is called student. I assign to it 1001 and 29 and Negan. This part, and then I return an object. طب this object that I am returning will be returned as S1, will be returned as S1, S1.display. So I am displaying S1.stname, which is 1001, and then S1.studentID, which is 29, and then st1.studentAge, which is Negan. I am going to display the values for them. Yes?
ايه الهبل ده؟
ايه التخلف ده؟
Mustafa. Okay. So I am going to display the values for OBG, which is S1, for the name and for the ID and for the age. Please look at the example again, and if you want to ask anything, just let me know.
دكتور حضرتك هتنزل الكودز دي على بلاك بورد؟
هنزلها على دوب بوكس وبكره على بلاك بورد I believe.
هتنزل يعني في أي كده كده
في
صح؟
أي وضع هتنزل يعني.
ما هو في أي مكان عادي يعني مش مشكلة. تمام شكرا يا دكتور.
طيب في حد يا جماعة محتاج لا أعيد له تاني؟ Okay, thank you يا جماعة, and for section 4 I will see you tomorrow with a new content, the start of 110 inshallah. Have a good evening and see you tomorrow. Yes.
Thank you دكتور.
هو grades الassignment هتطلع امتى؟
لما الناس تسلمه يا محمد.
ايه ده هو لسه الديدلاين ما جاش؟
لا لسه الديدلاين ما جاش.
انا ما اعرفش والله، انا اصلا عملت سبميت فمش خدتش بالي.
لا لسه ما جاش.
تمام ماشي شكرا يا دكتور.
شكرا يا دكتور.
طيب هو كان سهل يعني ولا كان صعب؟
الاساينمنت
هو
كان حلو يعني، لو حد كان فاهم 106 كويس يعرف يحله يعني، ما كانش صعب.
اوكي، ما برضه بالاكزامبلز دي الناس يعني ده تقريبا الناس دي ان شاء الله
في اكزامبلز كتير هنا شبه الاساينمنت اصلا.
دي حقيقة.
دكتور
ايوه يا ياسين.
حضرتك بتفهم في الفاير وول وكده؟
بفهم. ثواني بس استوب طبعا بفهم.
اصل انا بحاول عمال بلعب في نورتن، انا بستعمل نورتن الابلكيشن، فعمال بحاول العب فيه عشان اظبط اوبتمايز الكونكشن بتاعي عشان لما العب البينج بتاعي يبقى اعلى حاجه.
لا ماليش في اللي انت بتقوله يا ياسين. لا خالص يعني.
طب دكتور سؤال تاني، طب دي نو ايه اللي بيحصل في الجامعه كده من ناحيه الاونلاين؟ يعني تفتكر هينزلونا الشهر الجاي ولا لا؟
انا شخصيا ما افتكرش.
ما انا برضو حاسس كده يعني، بس يعني شكلهم هيكستندوا تاني صح؟
انا شخصيا ما افتكرش خالص يعني، بس يعني at the end of the day يعني ما حدش عارف يعني الارقام
يعني هم
لسه
لسه ما قالوش اي حاجه؟
لا هيقولوا بعد بكره، ده اللي قالوه.
هيقولوا لمين بعد بكره؟ الستاف ولا لينا احنا كمان؟
لا كل الناس.
هيبعتوا ايميلات يعني يا دكتور؟
طبعا هيبعتوا تقول AUC البروفوست هيبعت
ايه ده ثانيه يعني، هو ممكن يكون زي السمستر اللي فات؟
شكلها يا محمد كده تبقى زي السمستر اللي فات الصراحه.
ده انا